You've been hearing how some big brands are winning through simplicity. But don't get intimidated. You can do this too, no matter the size of your team or your budget. Want to learn the 6 behaviors you can instill to create simple experiences for your customers and your team members? Download a free copy of my Simple Playbook today. It'll help you immediately turn your customer experience around and create an Amazon experience without having an Amazon budget. Grab your copy of my Simple Playbook at mattlyles.com/simpleplaybook.
Welcome to the Simple Brand Podcast, the show dedicated to helping you create simple experiences for your customers and for your team members. Each week, we're bringing you amazing interviews with business leaders and authors who will teach you how to differentiate your business with the one thing your customers need the most: simplicity. Your customers live in a complex world. Let's make it simple. Now, here's your host, Matt Lyles.
You're starting to hear more and more about empathy lately. Hopefully, you're at least hearing about it from me. Hey, it's one of my 6 key behaviors to delivering simple experiences. But I want to make sure you really understand what empathy means as it relates to your customers and as it relates to your people. It's not just a psychological concept, and it's not just simply being nice. It's also a valuable behavior that'll be a significant competitive advantage to your business. When you instill empathy into your business's behaviors, you'll see higher customer loyalty and higher employee productivity. And that's why I'm glad to talk with the person who wrote the top business book on empathy, Michael Brenner. Michael's the CEO of Marketing Insiders Group and is a globally recognized speaker on leadership and culture and marketing. He's been featured by The Economist, The Guardian, and Entrepreneur Magazine. He's been named as a top business speaker by HuffPost and a top CMO influencer by Forbes. And he's the author of a few books, including his latest, Mean People Suck: How Empathy Leads to Bigger Profits and a Better Life. In Mean People Suck, Michael addresses the need for a culture of empathy that can deliver higher profits and a better life for everyone: customers, team members, leadership, and everyone in between. Michael and I talk about how you can create a culture of empathy and instill it into everything your team delivers. Here's my interview with Michael Brenner. Hi, Michael. How are you doing today?
Hey, Matt. I'm great. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Your book. Let's talk about it. Let's just jump right in. Tell me about your book, Mean People Suck.
Yeah.
The title isn't your typical business book title. How did you arrive at that?
Yeah, it's, if you read the subtitle, how empathy, can kind of basically help you succeed in business and life, it's essentially giving advice that sounds something like be nice to people and you'll win. And, or nice people don't finish last. And that sounded so boring in every iteration that I came up with. And so I was talking to before I got to the editing phase, I actually worked with a guy who was a script writer from Hollywood. Nice. And he was helping me because I felt like the structure I had of the book just wasn't really nailing the core premise. And I was talking to him and he helped me. He was like, oh yeah, he read it in like half a day. And he's like, move chapter 4 to chapter 1, move chapter 1 to chapter 7, done. And it fixed it, almost instantly. And then we started talking about the title. And there was a book that was popular out at the time about a year and a half ago, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And he's like, people love books with swear words in them. It's really capturing attention. And I was like, yeah, but that one's like the opposite of what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, and then it just hit me. I'm like, I'm trying to say like mean people suck. And he's like, well, there's your title. And that's how it started. And I went on GoDaddy immediately. And I was like, meanpeoplesuck.com. And somebody did own it, but they were, it was for sale for, I think, $1,500, I want to say. So I bought it right then and there, bought the domain, copyrighted the book, the title for the book, a t-shirt design as well. And we were off to the races.
Worth every penny of that $1,500.
Yeah, I think so.
Your background is in marketing and in content and content marketing. So even beyond that, you talk about empathy in marketing, but also empathy in employee culture. What I'd like to understand is more of the marketing side.
Yeah.
And what do you see as the future of marketing? And
Yeah.
how does empathy play a role?
Well, it's a great, I mean, the whole reason I wrote the book, Mean People Suck, which doesn't sound like a marketing book. But it really is. It's kind of a leadership and culture and maybe even society and political, commentary.
Yeah.
Disguised as it's a marketing book disguised as all of those things. And so here's the journey. Basically, 25-year career in marketing. And I started in sales. And in sales, you've got a number. You've got to hit your number each quarter, and then you generally have a head of sales that you have to tell, each week or month whether you're going to hit your number. And you succeed or fail based on that. And then I got into marketing, and it was like, what the heck is going on? Like, this guy is using scissors and crayons, and this person over here, she's talking about big ideas, and where is the accountability? It just struck me from the very beginning. And what I call the campaign mentality, I've always been opposed to, because even in sales, I remembered you can't call somebody up cold, and maybe you can. Maybe some people can. I could never call somebody cold and sell $1 million, piece of software. It was a relationship. It was formed over time. It took consistency. It took trust. It took, all kinds of things that took time and consistency and persistence. And I just didn't understand why marketing didn't feel the same way. So the whole concept of campaigns and a lack of accountability always bugged me. So, fast forward, I got to SAP. Eventually, I became the head of content and digital marketing, created a content marketing platform, delivered $7, return for every dollar we invested in it. And was so frustrated because I felt like no matter how successful it was, I still had to convince not my peers in sales and the executive team all got it. It was the marketers who I was fighting, every day. Like, this is why I'm doing this. We do it because it works. We do it because it helps customers. We have to have empathy for them in order to figure out how to build revenue and profit for us. We can't just start with, hey, we're awesome, buy our shit. And so, I felt like I fought that my whole life. I wrote a book called The Content Formula, which, talked about the mathematical return on investment formulas any company could use. And it just didn't resonate with the marketplace the way I wanted. And I started asking, my former peers and many frustrated marketers that I knew, CMOs and even CEOs, what's wrong with marketing? And they all said the same thing. We do what we're told. And then we're expected to, sort of show return on investment. And it's an impossible situation. The CEO says, where's the return on investment in marketing? And then turns around and says, spend $1 million, turning our logo from blue to yellow.
Right.
And it's just, so I wrote the book to try to address the problem that marketers have. And that is, we do the job we think we're supposed to do, promote the business. But the best way to promote the business is to really put customers first. It's to have empathy for our customers. And then what's interesting, and this is, I don't know if you asked this, but I'm gonna take it to the next level.
Tell me anyway.
It starts with, I think, a redefinition of marketing by marketers. That it has to be customer centric, and that marketers can't just continue to be the people that do stuff. We have to push back on executives. But what's really interesting and what I love about marketing right now, and I think it's the biggest, least talked about trend in marketing, is that if you ask what's in it for the customer, which is the core premise of Mean People Suck, if companies ask what's in it for the customer, if people ask what's in it for the person, any person you're dealing with in your relationships, you'll succeed. But what you'll find is that you need other people to help you. So, for example, audiences, prospects from companies are looking for answers to questions. The people that have those answers, the people that have that expertise, are already sitting inside your organization. It's the engineers, it's the product people, it's the sales people, the customer support people. All of the content, all of the knowledge, all of the information that we need to service our customers lives in the minds of our colleagues that sit all around us. And so this is the thing that I'm really excited about for 2021. Aside from getting a pandemic, a shot, aside from getting that vaccine, the thing I'm next most excited about is seeing marketing finally understand the importance of bringing employees, fellow colleagues, into the marketing discussions about how we do what we do.
Well, how can marketers take that knowledge from those key employees and transfer that to the customers?
Yeah, just ask them. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of marketers that we call it brand employee advocacy. I hate that term. I hate the word. The implication is go tell your employees to tweet stuff and to share press releases on Facebook, which is like the last thing anyone would ever want to do.
That's the best way to have everyone hide you.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to make your employees want to leave, if you do that. And so Marissa Mayer actually did a study way back in the early part of her career with Google, and what they found was that in any universe of people, whether it's take 100 engineers or 100 school kids or 100 moms or 100 aunts and uncles, whatever demographic you want, you take a universe. And what they found was that there's this law of mathematics that applies. About 80% of people are 100% pure consumers. They just sponge knowledge off of the rest of the world. 18% are the sharers. They're the networkers. They're the people that connect other people. They like to share content, but they don't necessarily create it. So what you've got left is a small group of people, a very small percentage of any audience that likes to create. And so my advice to marketers is just ask around your organization. Hey, listen, our website is going to be more effective if we speak with a human voice from real people that work here about the knowledge that they have. And we're not going to make anybody do it. We want to find the people that want to do it. The folks that understand the power of building their personal brand, maybe, somewhat selfishly, or the folks that they were just born to share what they know, that, kind of the teachers that are inherent in every organization. Just find the people that want to do it, and then give them the training and the opportunity to learn how to do it well. And it's what we did at SAP. We went and we had no budget for content, and I went around and I found there were 12 people that were blogging on their own sort of personal websites. And we asked them, hey, will you join our platform and write for the brand? But we're not going to give you any guardrails. It's just, do what you were doing. Just write and share what you know. And they were all pretty good. And we started getting other people interested, saying, this guy, he's, getting a lot of attention, and the company's, social media accounts are sharing his content. I want to be promoted like that guy is, or that gal is. And then, what we found was, the first thing that most new writers wrote wasn't great, but the fifth thing was pretty good, and the 10th thing was actually really good. And so, we made it our job to what I call activate the employees, the experts around the organization. And we found that worked really well.
Well, you say that you didn't give them any guidelines or guardrails. So did they actively promote their knowledge as it relates to how great SAP is for their customers, or was it more around just sharing the general knowledge?
Yeah, we had one editorial rule, and it was no product or product promotion. And so, what we found was, and we even trained them on what we called insidious promotion. And I always use this kind of Venn diagram to show what's wrong with marketing today. I say that there's like two circles that just barely overlap. And the one on the left is the crap that we create today. It's who we are, what we sell, why we're better. And on the right is the stuff that people actually want. And unfortunately, the reason there's only a small amount of overlap is that brands don't create a lot of content people actually want, and because it requires empathy, and it requires content marketing kind of approaches to do that. And so we taught people to watch the insidious natural instinct to want to promote. We think when we join a company and we create a piece of content that it should look like a press release. And so we tried to break people of that and just say, hey, answer a question. you answer questions all the time. You know lots of stuff about a topic. Just write about that. And whatever you do, don't allow that natural instinct, and it's important to recognize it as that. We want to please our bosses, and so we tried to break people of that and just to let their knowledge flow. And it was really amazing to see, some of the personal brands that got built and some of the careers that took off because of that.
And I love that approach, and I'm so thankful that was the guideline that you gave them. And it goes from pleasing your boss to actually pleasing the consumer who's reading that content.
That's right.
You've talked about empathy. We've talked about it a little bit, but I'd love to understand, at least from your perspective, how do you define empathy?
Yeah, I mean, it's, walking a mile in your neighbor's shoes is kind of the typical, the typical definition, if you will. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just feeling for others, not sympathy, which is feeling bad for others. It's, in a way, it's a little bit, paternalistic. I think sometimes when we think of empathy, we equate it too much to sympathy and feeling bad for people or those kinds of things. It's really just, hey, what would you do if you were them? And in the book, I talk about how we're not born with it. We actually learn it very early on,
Right.
because what we learn is like, hey, I don't like to feel pain. And if I recognize you as another human being, then I understand you don't like to feel pain either. So like, it's almost inherently a selfish journey, right? We start with something that we're experiencing. And if we just recognize other people as human beings, then we learn that empathy, and it's the reason that, Homo sapiens took over the world and joined communities and those kinds of things. And all of the, almost all of the progress that we've made as a society is, started with that sort of natural instinct to want to help each other and build each other up for the greater good. So that's kind of the definition that I try to propose in the book. And and I talk about it that you would do things very differently. I talk about something I call marketing amnesia. There's like if you think about, there's an ad that came out just during the beginning of the pandemic, and it was I almost don't even want to say their name and give them any free press, but it was LegalZoom. And the ad was, hey, now is a great time to update your will.
Oh man.
And it was a TV ad. They hired an agency. They created, they had creative made, and they bought airtime in primetime television to create an ad that said, you're more likely to die right now because of a global pandemic, so you should update your will. And it made me think of this marketing amnesia. Marketing amnesia is when marketers create things that they would hate as people. It's like we sit down at our laptops and we go and create a piece of marketing for people that if we were the recipient of that marketing, we would hate. And the LegalZoom example is a perfect, sort of visualization of that. And so we just need to stop doing that. I mean, it's really what it comes down to is just, think of putting the audience we're serving first. And that's empathy, having empathy for them.
Oh yeah. Well, and that goes back to, at least the LegalZoom campaign, that goes back to that campaign mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, some of those campaigns are directed from the C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
One person has it in their head, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to promote, this is how we want to promote it. Thinking through that person's priorities and what that person wants instead of what the customer wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a fine line. Like, I talk about Steve Jobs in the book as one example, someone that people, love to say, well, that's not somebody that had any empathy. But what's really interesting is if you actually follow what he did in his career, and I actually only talk about him in the book because of his investment in Pixar. And I use the Pixar storytelling formula, which our mutual friend, Andrew Davis, introduced me to the whole concept of it.
Nice.
And then I, read further about it in the book Creativity Inc. Written by one of the co-founders. But Steve Jobs, went and he was a co-founder of Pixar. I would say that's the second great thing that he did in his life. But if you look at what he did with Apple, he fought for design. He fought for user experience. He had to fight the people internally. But what he was really fighting, in a lot of ways, was that sort of natural instinct of people to want to kind of do what their bosses thought, not fighting for the user. When he got to Pixar, and if you read Creativity Inc., which is one of my mandatory business books for anybody out there, there's only a few. I have a handful, and that's one of them. Ed Catmull in the book writes about how it was, and they have a term for this sort of gathering of people. They would put a sort of a storyboard together, and they would grab people all around the company and say, sit down and listen to what you think. And anyone from the janitor to the producer could pull the plug, if you will, and say this sucks, and here's what's wrong with it, and here's how to make it better. And it was that kind of sort of group focus on creating the best thing you can that led to Pixar's unprecedented string of successes and leading to them being bought by Disney for $1 billion. So it's the kind of thing that even sometimes people we don't think have empathy, like Steve Jobs, well, they're actually fighting for people, and it's why they might look like they don't have any.
Yeah, because sometimes you have to fight really, really hard, and you've got to stomp your foot or plant your stake in the ground, so to speak, to be able to say, no, I'm willing to fight hard enough for this to make sure that we're meeting the customer's needs, that we're empathizing with the customer.
Yeah.
And Pixar, if there's any studio that helps the audience to really, really empathize with their characters, it's Pixar. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've made it through one Pixar movie without crying.
I agree. Yeah, they're brilliant masters, and as a student of storytelling, the Pixar storytelling formula, you can see it in every single one of their movies. And if your audience isn't familiar, just Google the Pixar storytelling formula, and you'll see it's really simple, and just about anyone can follow it. Every time I talk about it, I challenge the people in the audience to send me an example of a company that has used the Pixar storytelling formula in any marketing that they've ever done. And I've only ever gotten one example. And so can I tell you what the formula is real quick, Matt, if you're not familiar?
Oh, yeah. Well, if I recall correctly, I think there's like 22 different steps, but maybe that's their steps for storytelling. But then, yeah, share your formula.
That's their tips for storytelling. So the Pixar storytelling formula is once upon a time, every day, one day, because of that, until finally. That's it. And so once upon a time, there was a fish named Nemo. Every day he cared, and was concerned about the safety of his son. One day his son swam out into the middle of the ocean and got captured. Because of that, Nemo started this adventure despite his fears and anxieties. Because of that, he met Dory. Every story has a couple of because of that's. But until finally he's, found his son, and everybody was, lived happily ever after. Every single one of the Pixar movies follows that very simple formula. The brand that actually I did receive, if you Google Earth's Saru's Search, it's a short story based on a real story about a guy. They made a movie called The Lion, of a guy who was adopted in Australia but from India after getting lost on a train. It's kind of a crazy story. But if you Google that, you will see that it's the only example I've ever found of a brand, and I'm getting chills just talking about it, of a brand who used the Pixar storytelling formula to not talk about themselves, but to tell a story that really captures people's hearts and minds.
Wow.
Check it out.
And you've only found just that one example. I mean, when you've got a tried and true formula that is worth $1 billion+,
yep,
and only one brand has really used that formula.
If your audience has any good examples, please send them to me. And or if you want to create something that follows the formula, let me know. My friend Andrew Davis does this with videos. He takes case studies and he remixes them. I don't know if you got into this in your conversation with him, but he remixes awful company case studies so that instead of it being, hi, my name is Susie and I chose QuickBooks because it helped me with my accounting, and he takes the B-roll and he reverses the film so that it actually becomes something where you're like, wow, she's actually really interesting. I understand her pain points. Like I feel for her, this poor thing. And by the way, she chose QuickBooks at the end. Like it's just amazing what a little bit of mixing and reversing some elements of the way we tell stories typically as employees and marketers can really impact the emotional connection that you make with your audience.
Help me understand this. What's really broken here? What's causing marketers to not have an understanding of what their customers really need and then being able to deliver on that through empathy?
It's such an important question. And, it's the way that I try to highlight and demonstrate the answer is in my keynotes, I always say, what is the definition of marketing? And, and then, I usually see people start to think in the audience and they say, okay, forget what you think it is. What would your mom say if you ask your mom, what is marketing? And, everybody has the same answer. Like my mom specifically says, the Super Bowl ads, like it's people that create those ads for the Super Bowl. And, and it's like, if you ask anyone that's not in marketing or anyone that's not in the business profession, what marketing is, they say ads. And it's not to say that ads are bad or ads are always ineffective or anything. It's just that marketing is more than that. And it, I learned in college, it's a two-way conversation between a company and its customers. And so, how many people would actually define it that way, even those of us that are in marketing? And that's a textbook definition from, 1991, but it's relevant today more than it ever has been. We now have the digital channels. We now have all the analytics that you could ever want to understand what questions people are asking. And yet companies don't simply answer those questions with the knowledge and expertise they have. So that's what's broken. We marketers themselves, I think, I talk to a lot of younger marketers coming out of college and university, and they all want to go be like, they all want to run the Instagram account for a really well-known brand. Like, I want to go run Nike's Instagram account. Like, okay, I mean,
of course,
exactly. And it's crazy because, the impact of that is so minimal compared to, if you think of Nike, and I wasn't planning on using them, but Nike's brand is almost an entity in and of itself, that's bigger than what they sell. And that's what makes their storytelling, and they do a great job of it. And they use ads to do it, by the way. It's just not, they're not all ads. Everything they do in marketing isn't ads. They have a brand story that really resonates with people, and they're one of the few on the planet.
And they have shown an ability to tap into and inspire a large variety of people, not just hardcore athletes, but those who are aspiring, like those who kind of know, oh, you know what, I do need to start moving and I should just do it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, then there's other examples that don't use any advertising: Amazon, Starbucks, Netflix, Apple, you name any of those four brands. And they don't really do any advertising at all. I said that once, and I walked out of a building and I saw an ad for an iPad, and I'm like, okay, sure. I'm here in Manhattan and there's an ad for an iPad. Fine. Yeah. But I've never seen, you get my point. They deliver, they deliver their marketing through their user experiences and understand the power of referrals and goodwill. And so again, the point is that, we have to redefine. The big problem that marketers have is we have to redefine what marketing is. And so what is it? If it's a conversation between a company and a customer, we don't start conversations with "I'm awesome." We start conversations with a question like, "How are you? What how are you feeling? What can I do to help you?" Like, that's how we start conversations with people we don't know. It's almost always with a question. And yet brands never do that. And so that's what we need to change.
Yeah. Too many brands take that campaign approach to relationships. And it's more like, on the first instance, "Hi, how are you? Hey, what about getting married?
Yeah.
How about that big commitment right now?"
Yeah, exactly.
So what can you tell those functional areas of an organization that think that they don't interact with the customer? How can marketers help those functional areas understand their role in empathy and their role in the customer experience?
Yeah, in the book I have a diagram where I try to point to the org chart as being the biggest problem in organizations. And
Oh yeah.
when I talk to miserable employees, whether they're marketing or not, it's always my boss or my culture. The company culture is very traditional. And so I try to paint a new picture of what a new org chart might look like that puts the customer at the center. And it looks like a bullseye. And I have, so if you imagine the customer at the center of a circle, and then the spokes of the wheel, if you will, are marketing and sales and finance and accounting and legal and HR. And I have legal upside down. And my wife pointed that out to me, and I was like, I'm like, I have legal upside down on purpose because lawyers don't give a shit about customers, and that's fine. We'll leave them off of this new revolution that we're trying to paint. But everyone else is in support of someone, if not directly to the customer, an organization that supports people that support the customer. So if you're in accounting, it's pretty important that I get my paycheck each twice a month or whatever it is. So you're supporting folks that are supporting the customer, even if you're not doing that directly. Now, maybe accounting folks aren't going to have too much to say, as far as answering questions that could help, but I mean, product people, salespeople, customer service people, and marketers, all, and even operational folks. Engineers are a great example. Engineers are, we usually shove them in a closet, in a dark room with a white lab coat and tell them to, make shit. and they're sometimes the smartest people in a company. And it's just a waste to have them stuck in a dark room. Let's put some light on them and bring out what they know. One of the great tips, and my friend Andy Crestadino is, he and I both kind of been touting this for years, is look at your email sent box. Almost everybody's outbox, if you will, has answers to questions that might be helpful to customers. And there's just a treasure trove of content in those things. And even if it's an internal support document, there are just tons and tons of valuable insights and expertise that could be shared, that just happen on internal servers that just don't get published.
I've never even thought of that, but that makes absolute sense. Like, there's so many questions that are asked and answered throughout a corporation.
Yeah.
That would be beneficial knowledge to customers.
Yeah. One of the tricks I always found with executives who were scared of writing, is I wouldn't tell them they were writing a blog post. I would just send them an email with 3 questions, and they would answer them. And then I would say, hey, I just reformatted what you said in email into an article. What do you think? And, using their own words. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. I'm like, well, you did all the work. I sent you an email, you answered it because that's what you do. And you're sharing your expertise now, instead of with me, one person, with, the world. And, it's pretty interesting to see the light bulbs go on.
Oh yeah, and being able to understand how to be able to share that knowledge too.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go back to your org chart because I love it. I saw it a few weeks ago, through a webinar that you gave with marketing profs.
Yeah.
Props to marketing profs.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the idea of truly, literally putting the customer at the center of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many companies that claim we're customer centric, and they claim we put the customer at the center of everything we do. But an org chart like that actually brings that to light and actually brings it home. So I think that would also help some of those other functional areas, like operations, like engineering, even maybe like legal, to understand, when you're creating something for what you do, if you're creating a process, here's who needs to benefit from that. Mm-hmm. And if we just change that piece of the equation, here's who needs to benefit, then I think that would help a lot of teams.
Yeah, it's just this whole concept, like, what's in it for the customer? And it's funny, talking about Andrew Davis, he's the first one I think I proposed WIFTICA as an acronym to. And
wow.
and Andrew's one of the most brilliant creative people I know. And he was pretty skeptical that it was going to take off. And in 3 years of trying, he's been right. but just imagine companies that said, like, the CEO on down, the board on down, everything you do, ask what's in it for the customer. And I remember my first month at SAP, And one of my first jobs was to look at all the campaigns that we ran in the North American region and identify the best ones. And so I asked them simple questions like, okay, well, how much did we spend? What was the campaign? What was the result? And I was shocked when I found it was like 60, 70% of all of the money spent went to not a small result, a zero result. Like, we did a webinar, we got some leads, and none of them converted. We ran a paid search campaign. We maybe got some leads and none of them converted. We we sponsored a golf outing and some prospects came and none of them converted. Like, I thought it was so sinful, illegal, unethical to spend money at that rate for not a small, like, it'd be fine if you didn't get 100% return, maybe if you got 75% return or 25 or 50. No, these, like, the significant majority produced zero value for the organization. And so I think we have to train people, like, not only is it okay to ask what's in it for the customer, we have to maybe make a leap of faith that when we do that, it's going to deliver the results that we all want to be proud of. And so, you saw that webinar. I told the story of Reena Patel from Capgemini, who pushed back really hard, not only against her CEO who wanted to sponsor a golfer, but her own CMO who wanted the $20 million budget that she would get sponsoring the golfer. And the rest of the sales team that all wanted to, was looking forward to, getting into the, VIP roped off section at golf tournaments. And, she had to fight against all of that by saying, but what's in it for the customer? And she knew, from her research that 80+% of their audience didn't care about golf or watch golf and wouldn't be impacted. And, so she brought data to the fight, so to speak. But in the end, it was they allowed her to be, to challenge that cultural norm of just doing what the CEO says. She asked what's in it for the customer. And the best part of that I love about that story is not the insane ROI. I think it was 20 something X return on investment that she got, but it was
a small investment too.
So tiny. I mean, it was, around $100,000, I think. So, that you can do the math. What I love about it is that she elevated all of these consultants around the organization. They got more LinkedIn requests. They built larger, sort of personal brands. They not only closed sales at Capgemini, but some of them went on to become, heads of sales at startups and, got promoted and built, just these amazing platforms because of what she did. And that's what's cool about the customer-centric organization. Really understands that the teamwork, the humanity, and empathy for your team are just as important. And that's what so you not only are you creating a culture that cares about customers, but you almost by definition have to lock arms as an organization to serve those needs. And it creates, and I try to tell that story in the book, that it really, the benefits move out from the center. It's not just benefiting customers, it's benefiting colleagues and it's benefiting the company. And those companies that do it are successful. And I present plenty of math and data in the books to show that, lots of case studies and examples to try to, again, teach people that nice organizations don't just finish last. They finish first. They're outperforming their peers every single time.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, and I've had a few conversations with a handful of people lately around the concept of empathy. And, when I think of C-suite executives outside of marketing, I want to make positive assumptions about them, but my negative assumption is that they tend to roll their eyes at incorporating empathy. And the data that you have, the data that you share in your book, and these case studies, this case study like Capgemini, like that shows the real value, and that it not only benefits the customer, it benefits sales, but then it benefits all those other functional areas as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the webinar a couple weeks ago, I used the Jerry Maguire. We have to show them the money. Yeah. And again, a lot of books inspired my own thinking. The Service Profit Chain is the first book I ever read, first business book I ever read. And I think it was published in 1994. It was a Harvard Business Review article from 1993. A simple concept. These Harvard guys looked at companies that seemed to put customer service ahead of profit, had more engaged employees, and a higher retention rate, lifetime value, revenue per customer. So they called it the service profit chain because the chain is happy customers, happy employees make happy customers, and happy customers spend more. And so that's one of the first, sort of lines of defense I use. Jim Stengel's book Grow is another one. He's the former CMO at P&G, and he looked at the Fortune 500 and he said, which companies have a mission statement that is bigger than profit, bigger than, we're the best company in the world that sells widgets. That he looked at mission statements that talked about a larger purpose, and then he grouped them into a cohort and compared them against the rest of the Fortune 500, and he found that purpose-driven set of companies had 4 times higher stock prices. Again, those are just 2 books and the basic gist of 2 books that I used, in Mean People Suck, to talk about how we can start to convince the C-suite that this is good for business by showing them the money.
So let's talk about empathy in marketing to consumers. What brands are doing really well with this?
There's so many. It's interesting. Oracle asked me to do like a 1-minute video on how I think marketing is changing during the pandemic, and the thing that came to mind, and if you Google it, you can find it. But I just said I think it's the return of the corporate blog, and so we're seeing companies that had forgotten, like corporate blogs have been around from the first days of the internet, and companies have used them to varying degrees. But what we're seeing brands they're not focused as much. They're not sponsoring events because they're not happening. Right. They're not spending as much on advertising because it feels wrong. And I've heard this from a lot of CMOs. It feels wrong to advertise during the global crisis that we're in. Interesting. I love this. I didn't use this quote, I don't think, in the Marketing Process webinar because it's such a B2B audience. But the CEO of Coca-Cola said, we've stopped advertising because it's almost completely ineffective at building the brand. And I was like, wow. So the world's most recognizable brand's CEO just admitted that they stopped advertising because it doesn't help.
Right.
I'm like, that's a statement right there. But in general, I think we're seeing CMOs understand, they're reading the moment well enough to know that the context for promotion just isn't really there. So what's left? I mean, the only thing that's left is being helpful. And so, that's why, we work with companies like GE Healthcare. I talked about Capgemini, Cleveland Clinic. These are some brands that I talk about all the time that use content that's helpful to their audience to build amazing audience experiences that drive results. In the webinar, I talked about how you don't have to be a big brand. That Marketing Insider Group, I have 3 employees and 0 marketing budget. I publish 3 or 4 articles a week that I write or some guest posts from folks that I know, and we get 1 million visits a year, all unpaid, all organic. We rank for 24,000 keywords. A company of 3 people.
You do no paid advertising and no paid SEO.
Absolutely 0. Last summer, I had a conversion rate optimization specialist reach out to me and she said, I guarantee you that if you added some paid investment to your marketing mix, that we can show a return on investment. So I gave her $3,000 or $4,000. So she did some paid search. She did some paid Facebook boosts and ads. I can't remember what else, and not a single lead from any of it.
Wow.
And I wasn't being unfair to her. I asked her how much she needed to get to the result. I tested last summer, also tested outbound, sort of like LinkedIn spamming. I get so much of it myself. I'm like, this has to work for somebody. Yeah. And I met some guy who's like, I don't have a single client that hasn't seen our return on investment. And I'm like, all right, man. So let's do it. And we did it for 2 months, and sure enough, no leads. Well, it's not true. I got 2 people that would have never responded to me cold say no, thank you. And I told them, I'm like, listen, I didn't get a lead, but just the fact that you got a response from those companies tells me that, at least you know how to copywrite in an email, but they're still not leads, and I'm not going to continue paying you. So yeah, absolutely 0 paid marketing investment. And all of our growth comes from the organic search and nurturing that we do of that audience on our website.
Well, and that all goes back to what you were talking about earlier, in that marketing is a 2-way conversation, marketing is a relationship.
Mhm.
And even right now in this pandemic environment, people may not be turned on by advertising, but people still need help with something. They're still searching for answers for what they're looking for. And one of the best ways to do that is through content marketing.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I love to tell my clients, your audience is searching for answers every single day. Like, it's not like there's not a group of 5 people that only ask the question on Fridays, the first Friday, of each month. Like, there are lots of people that are asking, what is the thing that you sell and why is it important? Like, the corporate executive board, which is now part of Gartner, did this huge study in B2B, and they found that the largest gap of content produced by brands was not deeply technical. It was not like, hey, case study type stuff. It was what they called consensus and validation. And it was the most basic stuff. And the reason they pointed to that was because the people they talked to, the decision maker. My clients always say, we're looking for the decision makers. I'm like, okay, because they all have a stamp on their forehead. What corporate executive board found was the decision makers, when they self-identified in their research, their biggest problem was convincing other people of the need for the thing they were trying to buy. And the first step to doing that is explaining what it is and what problem it solves. And that's the content that we help our clients create, because that's the biggest gap that we see in brands with the marketing that they do.
Yeah, those other people need that simple answer in simple language.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because while people are searching every day, the trends don't change that much. I have one client, we created kind of a keyword strategy as part of the base foundation for our clients. We say, here's the 50, 60, 70, 100 keywords that we want to track over time. And our content will deliver increases in your ranking for these terms. It's basically our promise. And I have a client that's like, okay, well, let's meet quarterly because our priorities change each quarter. I'm like, well, just because your priorities change each quarter doesn't mean the audience's search patterns change. We will certainly do, we have quarterly reviews with every one of our clients, but I'm like, but your keyword strategy should not change more than more than 1 or 2 times a year, because, if you sell master data management software, whatever that is, people are going to be searching, what is master data management software? Why do I need master data management software? What benefits does it have? How do I implement it? What does it cost? People will always ask those questions, whether your priorities change or your features change or you have a new product release or a new executive. Nobody cares about those things. People want answers to simple questions.
And those answers are going to answer what's in it for them.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Comes right back full circle.
It is. And when using empathy in marketing, what's the biggest mistake you see and you want to tell marketers, do not do this?
Well, I mean, I don't see any mistakes in marketers using empathy. The mistake that marketers make is not having empathy in the marketing they do. I've never seen anyone be too empathetic. I think executives sometimes might think, how does this benefit us? And so one of the mistakes I see, and I talk about it, I think it's chapter 7. Chapter 6 and 7 in the book are basically learn how to build the business case for why empathy matters to your organization and get them to sign off. And then the next chapter is actually the storytelling, component. You need to learn how to tell a good story in order to do that. So you've got to build the business case, which is the facts and the data, but then you need to learn how to tell it in a way that convinces other executives of, getting that buy-in requires not just data and research, but also an understanding of effective storytelling, which is all about building rapport with your audience, so it kind of, again, comes full circle. So those are the big mistakes I see empathetic marketers making. They're often miserable in their jobs. And I kind of wrote the book for that miserable empathetic marketer that I felt like I was, back in my corporate marketing days. Oh. Like, I'm doing good stuff. It's working. I'm getting results. I feel good about my job. And my boss thinks I'm doing a bad job. and his peers or her peers don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. Like, what's the problem? And so I wrote the book for people really in marketing or any job that aren't feeling that they're understood, even though they might be doing the right thing or like what they're doing. It's all about learning how to build that that business case and tell that story. And so, I tried to give the answer, whether you're a CEO or you're the janitor. How do you build a career that you're happy with, and that basically means it's not enough just to have empathy. You need to learn how to sell the benefit of that to other people.
It's being able to help others understand that too.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Michael, we've learned a lot from you today, and I love all of your concepts, and especially the case studies and the data that backs up why empathy is valuable. Where can people go to learn more from you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I mean, if you're interested about what we do, you can go to Marketing Insider Group, and you'll see it's less of a company website and more of a blog that you could also use to reach out to me. But subscribe there, and hopefully you learn something. Meanpeoplesuck.com, I own the domain, so you can certainly see more about the book and some of the content we publish there. And just connect with me on LinkedIn, and it's how we got connected, Matt, after the webinar. And love to connect with people, and happy to share any help or tips or insights I can with what you're struggling with.
One last question before you go. If you were to create a 5-song soundtrack for Mean People Suck, or for your work, what songs would you include?
All right, here we go. So you gave me time. I appreciate the heads up on this one. Because I mentioned to you, I don't judge people often, but I would judge somebody who said, well, I'm not really into music, because I'm one of those people that I wake up in the morning and there's a song in my head already. I'm like, wow, that's weird.
Nice. That's me, 24 hours.
Yeah, I moved from Chicago back to my hometown of Philadelphia after my first job. And the one thing that I wouldn't put in the U-Haul was my stack of 400 CDs. So I did, which I still have, by the way.
Nice.
So I have, what I did was I pulled a song from each decade.
Ooh.
So are you ready?
This is going to be fun. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to start with probably my all-time favorite song, Led Zeppelin, "Fool in the Rain."
Nice.
Very bluesy for you there. I don't know if my wedding song was "Let's Fall in Love." Definitely love the blues and jazz background. The 80s is that's the 70s. The 80s is a funny decade. I went with Journey's "Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'," just because in college I used to sing, after a couple of beers, me and my friends would all, just belt that one out. So it's good memories there.
There you go. This
one's very obscure. Toad the Wet Sprocket, "Walk on the Ocean."
Oh, yeah. That's not that obscure.
Yeah, for some people. All right, Radiohead's "Creep." That's my 90s. That's my that's my early 2000s. Yeah, this is 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And then so my last one, because I couldn't do 2020 obviously, but for the 2000s, it's Plain White Tees, "Hey There, Delilah."
Oh, nice. Very cool. Wow, that's a pretty good eclectic mix there, and that takes you through the decades.
There you go.
I love it.
All right.
Cool. Well, Michael, thank you so much. I'm grateful for all your lessons, and I'm hoping that people can hear this and learn how to instill more empathy in all that they do, but especially with their customers. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Michael Brenner. So go check out his book, Mean People Suck. And if you're enjoying the Simple Brand podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's going to make it a lot simpler for you to get future episodes like the next one featuring Greg McEwen. Greg is the best-selling author of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. Now, you're really going to want to hear this episode because Greg and I completely throw away the interview and we turned it into an essentialism intervention where Greg literally coaches me on my business and helps me prioritize my approach. So go ahead and subscribe. You'll automatically get Greg's episode as soon as it's live. Until then, keep it simple.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Simple Brand Podcast. Want to make your listening experience simple and automatically receive each new episode? Visit our website, simplebrandpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. If you're finding value from the Simple Brand Podcast, leave us a rating or review. That helps us get the show to the ears of the people who need it most. Be sure to catch Matt right here next week. Same Matt time, same Matt channel. Until then, keep it simple.